everyone, my name is Nathan. I'm a pastor at Reunion Christian Church, and I quickly want to just say thank you for checking out this 3-video series on how to read the Bible. Now, I know that many of us who are followers of Jesus, we would openly say that we know that we should read the Bible. But then we open it up and it can feel intimidating, right? We're afraid we're going to misunderstand it, or maybe we're afraid we're going to misapply it. We open it up and there's verses that don't seem to make sense. We open it up and there's verses that feel almost offensive. And we want to understand who God is. We want to understand who Jesus is. We want to know what we've been called into, but it's difficult. So for many of us, we avoid reading scripture on our own. We kind of just wait for someone to read it and explain it to us. Or for some of us, we read it and we just kind of hope for the best, right? We figure if we read it, we try to be a nice person, and that's the best we can do, and it's got to count for something, right? And I want you to know that if you feel this intimidation when it comes to approaching scripture, you are not alone. You're not alone. That is why we launched this video series, is because the way that you feel, it's how many of us feel. And because many of us feel this way, we wanted to put together these 3 videos that hopefully give us a framework to help us understand how to read the Bible. But let's start with this question that will help us build towards this framework. Let's start with the question, what is the Bible? I mean, what is it really? And I'm going to steal some language here from the Bible Project, which is an amazing group that puts together YouTube videos on different books of the Bible and the Bible as a whole. They're one of the main resources that we used for this video. I'll link them and all the other resources that we use so you can go check them out. Just want you to know a lot of this is not stuff that we made up, but just a gathering of information from great resources that we want to provide for you. But let's start with that. What is the Bible? The Bible is an ancient library of books that all emerged out of the history of the people of ancient Israel. And at some point in their history, men named prophets began to see what was happening in Israel's history. And they were seeing it as an essential part of the story of what God was doing for humanity. So the prophets, they began to write down significant narratives, amazing poetry. They would write in beautiful ways using all kinds of descriptive language, metaphor, every other literary device that you can think of. And all together, these writings, they tell a story about how God is using Israel to bring order and beauty out of the chaos of the world. And it all builds up to talk about a leader who will renew all creation. But then, in this portion of Scripture, what we know as the Old Testament, it comes to an end. This leader that they have been pointing towards and hoping for, it never shows up. Now, then we have this man named Jesus, and he steps onto the scene. And he claims to be the leader this Old Testament was pointing towards. He does some amazing things, and then he dies and he's resurrected, and his followers, a group of people called the apostles, they begin a new set of writings that retell the works of Jesus. We call these the Gospels. They write about the Jesus movement that's taking place outside of Israel. We call this the book of Acts. And they circulate letters to help people who are part of the Jesus movement live more like Jesus. So I know this is a lot of history in a short amount of time, but hopefully we understand these letters, this narrative, this group of writings put together is what we know as the Bible. It's the thing that's probably sitting on your shelf or on your desk, or you might even be holding it in your hands right now. However, knowing what the Bible is and knowing how to approach it are 2 different things. Right? Many of us probably know stories of people who approached the Bible in a way where they tried to force the Bible to do or to be something it was not meant to be. I think about it like this. About 4 years ago, I got an Apple Watch and I loved it, right? Shout out to Apple Watch and anyone who owns one. It was great for everyday use. But about a year and a half ago, I started running. And when I started running, I started noticing something really weird that was happening. I would run the same route every day, but each day I would get a completely different distance recorded on my watch. And not like slightly difference, right? Not like a 0.02 miles here or there or something like that. I mean, I'm talking about drastically different amounts. Like I would run this loop around my house on Monday and I would get 2.5 miles. Great, that's awesome. Then I'd run the same loop on Tuesday and get 3 miles. And then I would run it on Wednesday and I would barely get 2 miles. One time I went running with my wife Emily and I was pushing my son in our jogging stroller. And at the end of my run, it gave me, I think it was like 0.4 miles, right? Completely different. And then I realized my Apple Watch didn't have a GPS in it. So it was doing its thing to measure my stride and then guessing how far I was running based on that stride and how many times I pumped my arms and all these different things. And I soon realized the Apple Watch, great for everyday use, not great as a fitness tracker. See, I was trying to force my watch to do something that it really wasn't designed to do. And because I didn't understand what it was supposed to do, I didn't understand it. And I think for many of us, this is how we approach the Bible. We open up the Bible, and because we don't know how to look at it, and we don't have a lens for how to interpret it, we try to force a reading on it that was never designed to be there. So we do all kinds of things to try to help us understand it. I mean, I remember as a kid not really knowing how to read the Bible. So I would do this thing where I'd flip through the Bible and close my eyes and point at a verse and then open up and read that verse. And that was what God wanted to say to me that day, right? Unless I didn't like it. And then I messed up and I needed to close my eyes and do it again, right? Or maybe some of us, like we sign up for a Bible app that's going to send us a verse of the day. And don't get me wrong, that's a great thing to do. There's nothing wrong with getting texts that encourage us from Scripture, but that's not a framework for helping us approach Scripture. So in this video, I want to just propose this basic framework. It's not going to be something deep. It's not going to be something that's probably unheard of. I don't have just like some secret thing to share with you that is going to revolutionize your life, right? Like I just want us to be able to slightly shift our focus when we approach the Bible because I think it could be extremely helpful. So let's start with this. When we read any passage of Scripture, I want us to look at these 4 questions. What does this passage of Scripture tell me about who God is, what God has done, who I am in light of this, and what I should do in light of this? You see, I think many of us approach Scripture with the question in mind, what does this say to me? And I get it. That's an important question. It's a great question, but that shouldn't be the first question that we ask. We need to understand that at its core, the Bible is a story about Jesus. Now we'll look in the next video at the fact that the Bible is made up of historical texts, poems, letters, all different kinds of genre written at different times, to different types of people and different types of community. It's a collective of stories and writings for sure, but ultimately it is one continuous story. It is the story of God, a loving Father, putting his family back together. And the way that he does this is through the life, death, and resurrection of his Son, Jesus. And although every scripture is not specifically about Jesus, they all point to God, and we see God's personhood lived out in Jesus. For many of us, this is the question we force on the Bible when we try to get it to do what it was never designed to do. It was not meant to be understood through a me lens. And although Scripture does speak to us I just want us to know that's not the primary lens that we should read Scripture through. Instead, the questions we asked earlier allow us to read Scripture through a Christ lens. We see what the Scripture says about Jesus, and when we better understand who Jesus is and the characteristics of God found in the person of Jesus, that helps us know who we are and understand who we are and understand how we should live. I get it, it's a real subtle shift, but I really believe it can have drastic implications for how we read the Bible. So let's give it a shot. Let's put it into practice and see how it can help. Hopefully you have a Bible with you. If not, I encourage you to just pause this video real quick and go and grab one. And make sure you bring that with you for the next few videos in this series. But right now we're going to read a popular story that you might have heard at some point in your life. In 1 Samuel 17, we're going to read the story of David and Goliath. But this time, as you read it through the lens of the 4 questions that we talked about. And here they are again. What does this passage of Scripture tell me about who God is, what God has done, who I am in light of this, and what I should do in light of that? Please, I'm telling you, don't skip this part. This is what it's all about, is opening up our Bibles and reading them through this lens so we can better understand it. So there'll be a little break, but feel free to pause the video, take as much time as you need, that you're able to fully read the story and fully dig into these questions. But let's go ahead and read 1 Samuel now. Many of us have heard this story before, and if we have, we've probably heard it with themes like, well, the bigger they are, the harder they fall. Or maybe you've heard that you can slay your giants if you just trust in God a little bit more. But with this new lens, we see it in a different light. We see that the army of Israel could not defeat the giant on their own. They needed a substitute to step into their story and defeat Goliath on their behalf. And when we see it in that lens, we understand that we are not David in the story. Jesus is. And because Jesus has defeated the ultimate giant, sin, brokenness, death, we can, through the power of his Spirit, just like the Israelite army, defeat the other enemies around us. Things like our hurts and our habits and our hang-ups. See, when we see that the Bible is not a story about us, but a story about God that he invites us to participate in, we begin to understand who we are. But more importantly, we understand who Jesus is. And that shows us who we should be. Thanks for watching. I'm really excited about these videos. I appreciate you taking the time to check them out. Make sure to check out the next few videos in our How to Read the Bible series. A reminder, I will tag things in the video description that will be helpful, like sources that we used if you're looking for a new Bible, some new Bibles to consider checking out, where to grab some online, just a bunch of different information that will hopefully be helpful to you. But again, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.